Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And finally, mercifully for those of you who have been waiting, the offseason will get underway today. Apologies that we haven't had as many videos over the last several weeks at this point. Things have been incredibly busy at work. Fortunately, as we head into the weeks of the holidays, passed a big benchmark on Friday, which was yesterday, as I'm recording this episode on Saturday morning. So should have slightly more availability to be playing a little OOTP and hopefully putting out a few episodes over the next week and a half. But clearly going to have the holidays also going on with that. Given that I've been so busy at work, our holiday plans have been quite in flux, but hoping to spend some time with family and friends, either here where we live or perhaps traveling a bit over the next week and a half. We'll also still be working some of that time, unfortunately. But first, want to just start off by wishing all of our viewers, whether you're a loyal, long-time viewer or you happen to be a first-time viewer who's stumbled upon us, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, whatever you celebrate and whoever you celebrate it with. Hope you enjoy some time to relax and recharge and reconnect in the coming days and weeks. As we get ready to move forward in this episode, before we get back to the mythical and fictional Oakland A's here in 2039, who are still in Oakland and one of the more successful franchises in baseball at this point, despite John Fisher still being the owner and still being run on a shoestring budget with very limited fan loyalty. Just another quick piece of information on my New York Yankees. Since the last time we checked in on the real world, they have since made a trade for Cody Bellinger. So at this point, with Bellinger, Williams, and Fried, certainly have to be pleased with how the offseason has gone in the closing in on 2 weeks since we found out that Juan Soto was going to be one and done with the Yankees. I think in a perfect situation, I hope that Bellinger can play center field. That would allow the Yankees to move Judge to right, see what Dominguez can do perhaps as an everyday player in left, and then obviously have Stanton primarily in the DH spot. If Bellinger ends up at first base, then maybe you have to play Dominguez in center field. I don't know how well that's going to work out. Dominguez has said he's a natural center fielder. He's more comfortable there. But he was pretty brutal at times in a small sample size in left field last year, which certainly makes you question how he's going to handle center field more effectively than that. So I like adding the left-handed hitting Bellinger, even though he's probably overpaid for what he is this year and possibly next year. Needed a lefty bat and potentially needed a center fielder. Even with those moves, though, to be realistic, the Yankees still have a couple of pretty significant holes. Got a hole at first base, and then depending on what they decide to do with Jazz Chisholm, they've got a hole at second base or third base. I think a lot depends on if they end up signing another player. Given the contracts that they've offered and the contracts that they've taken on, I don't think the Yankees are going to be playing at the top end of the market at both first base and third base. Honestly, it's not inconceivable that they won't play in the top end of the free agent market at either position. But at this point, if they do bring on a relatively big-time first baseman or third baseman, I'll be pretty content with how they've responded to the loss of Soto. Seems like at third base, obviously Bregman is the prize. And even though one first baseman is now off the market, it doesn't seem that this large sample of first basemen in their early to mid 30s, a lot of whom are right-handed power hitters, a lot of whom who don't necessarily hit to grade average and perhaps strike out a bit more than you would hope. Doesn't seem like the market is incredibly robust, so I guess perhaps the hope is maybe the Yankees get a little bit of a discount a month and a half from now from someone who lingers on the market. And when I say a discount, I mean either a little less money or perhaps a year or two fewer than you might have expected that player to get in November. But assuming the Yankees fill first base or third base in the free agent market, it seems plausible to me that they look to fill the other hole. And again, that hole could also be at second base if they decide to keep Chisholm at third. But they would look to fill at least one of the holes in the infield with some mix of the holdovers from last year. I'm thinking guys like Oswaldo Cabrera, Oswald Peraza, Ben Rice, maybe even DJ LeMahieu. Health willing, I could see a couple of those players obviously being on the mix to make the 26-man roster, and perhaps in some type of platoon situation at first or third or second, depending on how the rest of the offseason goes. But at this point, with 3 pretty significant acquisitions, if the Yankees make one more with a veteran bat to round out one of those infield holes, I won't be complaining about Cashman and Steinbrenner's response to the loss of Juan Soto. So turning our attention back to fictional baseball in the future, where I am the general manager of a Major League Baseball organization. We have made one Major League contract offer. You can see we've obviously trying to bring back a lot of our minor league free agents as well. And then we've also made offers to arbitration-eligible players. But Alan Hunsaker, who we signed as a free agent last offseason and pitched okay for us. Not as great as we would have hoped, but he was still a respectable Major League reliever. And when we look at his track record and we look at his ratings and we look at what he brings into the clubhouse, and when we look at that we could actually probably start him in a pinch if we needed to, and the fact that he's probably, when we think about upcoming free agents, the best pitcher who's going to be on the market, and he's not looking for a ton of money. We've offered him $4.5 million over the next 3 years with team options for the second and third seasons. I don't even think there's a guarantee that he makes our 26-man roster coming out of spring training. If we have an injury or two, then he certainly would. But with the contract we're trying to sign him to, I think he could have some trade value if we get into a numbers game at the end of March when we're trying to get to a 26-man roster. And since he's not looking for a ton of money, the thought is try to get him locked up now before he actually hits free agency. And we have made a couple of other trades in addition to making that offer to Alan Hunsaker. I don't think any of them are going to be revolutionary, but in terms of clearing a little bit of salary and filling what we identified as one of our potential weaknesses last episode, I think we made decent progress with the 2 trades that I've made as this episode gets underway. And the reason I was talking even with the offer that we made to Hunsaker about him not necessarily making the 26-man roster coming out of spring training unless there's some injuries is that we have made a trade to bring on a pretty interesting left-handed reliever, and that's the 25-year-old Jake Mendick, who's spent the last 3 years with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Just picked up him in a trade. Certainly looks like he could be a nice addition to our team. The 25-year-old, 138 ERA plus and a 71 FIP minus over the course of parts of 3 seasons in the majors. He's been an above replacement level player. I don't think he's a great pitcher, but as we talked about in the last episode, only had 3 lefties penciled into our pitching staff for next year: the starter Blumenshine, the reliever Carmichael, and the closer Huntley. And although I don't necessarily think Mendick is a great pitcher, I think he certainly can be a very good pitcher. He is a guy who's now arbitration eligible, so going to start making a little bit more money. But he brings a high work ethic to the team. He's a fan favorite, and he's got a pretty nice arsenal for a reliever with above average screwball, fastball, and sinker, as well as a changeup that he's working on. And we think his stuff, movement, and control are all a bit above average. Doesn't have a ton of stamina, and honestly, his lefty-righty splits, he's arguably a little more effective against right-handed pitching, or right-handed batting, but still think he'll ultimately be useful for us against lefties. Don't love that he's fragile, but he is a guy who was an all-star this past season when he had 30 saves for Arizona to go with a 3.79 ERA. Only throws in the low to mid-90s. So not a perfect solution, but felt like of someone that was realistic for us to pick up. He was the best option out there. We had to give up a decent amount to bring him on board. Least interesting guy we gave up was 26-year-old Nate Boyce, a guy who we had signed come up through our organization, but you can see last year played only 24 games, starting 19 in AAA for us. Cincinnati had taken him from us in the Rule 5 draft last year, eventually sent him back during the season, and he went right into AAA for us. Although he is a left-handed hitter, which we could use a little bit, not an impact hitter, not an impact fielder, and he's 26 years old, so we're happy to include him. We also did have to include Sam Gentile. This is a guy who brought that captain personality to our team and has spent a little time with us in the majors over the last couple of years, but is a average right-handed hitting outfielder with admittedly solid range and good speed. A useful player, but given our depth at the outfield position and the fact that he just completed his last option year, felt like it made sense to include him in the trade since it's unlikely he was going to make our 26-man roster, and we were going to have to potentially risk losing him for nothing when we tried to send him down to AAA. And then we had to give up the minor league infielder Jorge Sevilla. This was probably the most significant decision we had to make. Really good speed, really good infielder, a lot of positive personality traits. Was average offensively in Double-A last year, well above average when he started the season in high A ball. He's going to be turning 23 later this week. Our thought with Sevilla is, as much as we like the speed and as much as we like the defense and him being a good influence in the clubhouse, he's never going to hit home runs at the major league level, and he's not going to draw a ton of walks. Does have the potential to be a really good contact hitter with really good gap power, but we've got a lot of good young infielders, and we're bringing on a pretty solid major league left-handed pitcher who's in his mid-20s, 3 more years of team control, filling a hole on our team right now. And given that we're a win-now team and that Sevilla is probably a couple of years away and no guarantee that he's ever going to hit enough for us to be anything better than a really good utility infielder, given the strength we have in the infield and the strength we have with some other infield prospects, felt that we could afford to give him up, although 5 years from now, it's not inconceivable that Sevilla is a 280 hitter with a nice glove who's stealing 30 bases a year while also knocking a lot of doubles and triples around the park. So Could be a trade that comes back to haunt us a bit, but I think we've got other options for Sevilla in our organization as infielder over the next 5 or so years, whereas we don't necessarily have a left-handed reliever as good as Jake Mendick. And you may be asking, hey, old school, weren't you considering trading away the veteran first baseman Jake Bauers, who it's probably time to move on from, and couldn't you have tried to include him in the trade for Mendick? And the answer is yes, and wow, you have a wonderful memory. But unfortunately, the Diamondbacks were interested in Bauers, would have still likely needed to include additional players with him to get the deal done. But the deal breaker from our perspective was that Arizona is negative in terms of their money. So we were going to have to be retaining all of Bauers' contract and giving an additional player or two to pick up Mendick if we used Bauers in a trade, which is why we ended up putting the package together highlighted by Gentile and Sevilla, simply because we didn't want to be retaining a lot of money as the Oakland A's. But we did end up finding a trade to move on from Mr. Bauers. Had to include him, the 33-year-old, coming off of a 18-homer, 83 ribby season with a 112 WRC plus. Still signed for another couple seasons at $21.2 million. The Red Sox kept 60% of that salary when they traded him to us, so we would have been on the hook for about $8.5 million a year if we had retained his salary and traded him to the Diamondbacks. So instead, we sent Bauers to the Cubs along with minor league outfielder Pete Bush, another left-handed hitting outfielder with a good personality, but was a slightly above average offensive player in high A ball last year as a 24-year-old, so certainly not viewing him with the profile that he has as a big part of our future. And the market for Bauers was unfortunately not overwhelming. As I mentioned, even if we traded him to Arizona for Mendick and kept his salary, we still had to add in additional players to get the deal done. But we got at least an interesting guy who might be able to help us in return. 24-year-old left fielder Steve McIlvaine. He is that left-handed hitting bat that we could use next year, as we've talked about. We've got the switch hitters Ortega and Landine in the lineup, along with the left-handed hitting catcher Mendoza. But certainly would love to have at least one additional left-handed bat on the roster. And McIlvaine could be in the mix to be a utility corner outfielder for us. Had his first full season in the majors with the Cubs last year, and he put up a 92 WRC plus, a 1.2 WAR. So above replacement level overall, but a below average major league bat. Does have decent speed. He stole 15 bases, solid bunter, a competent corner outfielder, and a relatively average bat that fortunately does look a little better against right-handed pitching than left-handed pitching. I don't think he's a guy that we'd want to be starting, and there's not even a guarantee that he makes the 26-man roster as a fourth or fifth outfielder. But he does give us a youngish left-handed hitting outfielder to potentially be in the mix as a pinch hitter coming off the bench, or a guy who could help us if we have some injuries. And the most important thing about making the trade for McIlvaine is that he's still got 3 option years left. So even with the trade of Gentile, we still have outfielders like Harmon, the right-handed guy who's come up through our organization, Phelps, the left-handed hitting outfielder who we picked up in a trade with the Red Sox a couple years ago, who could be competing with McIlvaine for that final spot in our outfield next year. But unlike those other two, McIlvaine does have options, so it's conceivable that we just stash him in AAA for the time being. But given that we unfortunately could potentially be moving on from the franchise Jake Ortega after this season, it's not inconceivable that McIlvaine could have a more prominent role for us down the line. Overall, fans upset that we lost Gentile, upset that we lost Bowers. They were pleased to have Mendick come on board. Also lost some leadership with both Gentile and Bowers leading. Still hoping that the clubhouse is in decent shape with the young starting pitcher Baumler as a captain personality. But when all was said and done, we actually lost a point in fan interest, dropped off of that 100 that we had scraped and grasped for so desperately to get to that level over 15 plus years at this point. We finally got there, and now we've lost it. But honestly, as we head towards the beginning of free agency and arbitration, we've got some pretty significant players that we hope to be signing to extensions. Mendick, as we mentioned, another arbitration-eligible player, and he's fairly popular. I also have the offer out there to Hunsaker, as we talked about. So probably will, over the near term, get that fan interest back up to 100. The bigger picture concern is, of course, the pending loss of Juan Ramos, the outstanding designated hitter, who's a very popular player and has been a big part of our offense the last few years. But given the youth we have in our organization and given some of the trades that we've just made, I think that it makes sense to move on from Mr. Ramos. We've submitted the QO to him, try to bring back Hunsaker and Kamani O'Banner, just going to be too expensive. Jaden Boakai is a guy that if we could sign him to a minor league deal, would certainly love to have him back in the organization as a 31-year-old veteran. But you can see he's looking for 5 years at $3 million a year. Does have one option year left, but presumably he would decline a minor league assignment. And given that we've got Mendoza as our starting catcher and the outstanding defender Ogata as our backup, and we also do still have the top prospect in our organization as a guy who can play catcher as well, and that would be Jonah Richards, who we've been trying to make a little more versatile defensively by playing him at first base more recently. Making an offer to Jaden Boakai probably isn't on the top of our list of things to do. So we're exploring trade options for the likes of Garland, Ross, Dolan, and Mesidor. Unfortunately, at their ages, with the fact that they're now all arbitration eligible and in some cases making pretty significant money, with Mesidor looking to make around $4 million next year. Not much, if any, demand for those guys. So in all probability, we'll end up making no offers to those guys if we're unable to trade them away, and just clear a little bit of room on the 40-man roster by the time we get to free agency. So with those initial trades made, I'm going to keep exploring more trades, but honestly, I think the most interesting thing to see in this episode is going to be whether we make any progress in award season. We won an MVP award last year with Jake Ortega, the second of his career. He was injured for much of this year, even though he did end up hitting over 300 with a very strong 152 WRC plus in the limited action he has. Don't think we have a MVP on the team this year, although Alejandro Landin likely to get some significant support for that award. But with the likes of both Juan Pimentel and Darnell Selvey in our organization, in addition to the young pitcher Dave Baumler, who had a nice rookie year, although he ended up on the injured list for the playoffs, feeling like we could have several players receiving pretty significant support for Rookie of the Year this season. And we've simmed ahead a few days as expected. The arbitration-eligible players that we have on our team that we haven't made offers to really don't have much value. Positively, though, the arbitration-eligible players that we want to bring back are signing their contracts, and the fans Happy to have Palomares back. Very excited to have Mendoza back. Happy to have Mendick, who we just traded for, back. Excited to have Chuck Huntley, our closer, back. And fan interest also increases with the extension to Boyce. We've signed a minor league hitting coach for the lower levels of our organization, still negotiating a contract with Nexis Marino to hopefully be our pitching coach at one of our rookie ball teams as well. So as we sit here on the 8th, obviously with those signings that the fans liked, fan interest back at 100 or above, which hopefully will help offset any negativity associated with the expected loss of Juan Ramos in a month or two. And we have gotten Alan Hunsaker signed, so with the return of Hunsaker and the trade we made for the lefty Mendick, feeling like our bullpen is in really good shape right now, along with a rotation that we really like. Did not have a Gold Glove winner this year, but we did just get to the Silver Slugger announcements, and not surprisingly, Alejandro Landin, the infielder who we mentioned, we expected to have some support for the most valuable player this year after he tied for the American League lead with 40 homers while putting up a 148 WRC plus and a 6.5 WAR. Won the first Silver Slugger of his fine career. Other than that, though, no Oakland A's have won any hardware quite yet. Rookie of the Year is going to be tomorrow, though, and as we mentioned, feeling like we've got some very strong candidates for that award. And then after having the best record in the American League this year, would certainly think that Manager of the Year is another award we might get some attention for. And I mentioned we did not win the Mariano Rivera Award in the American League this year. That went to Juan Padilla of the Texas Rangers. But Mike Orozco did get some attention. Second consecutive really strong year for him as our stopper. And he did get 5 first-place votes and finished second in the voting. And as we anticipated, had some strong voting for Oakland A's for the American League Rookie of the Year. Juan Pimentel was your unanimous American League Rookie of the Year, and Darnell Selvey was actually your unanimous second-place finisher in the American League Rookie of the Year voting. A little surprising that the pitcher Dave Baumler did not get any attention, but certainly having the 2 best rookies in the American League as guys who we can hopefully build around for the next several years is a big step in the right direction for the A's. Selvey, who finished second, 297 average, 32 doubles, 20 homers, scored and drove in 81 runs each, 150 WRC plus and a 4.1 WAR as our left fielder in his first major league season. Former first-round draft pick of ours, 26th overall in 2035. And then Pimentel was an IAFA signing a couple years earlier than that in 2033. Played just 102 games in the majors, but hit 342, 32 doubles, 6 triples, 22 home runs in 430 at-bats, 85 runs scored, 83 ribbies, and a 162 WRC plus and a 5.1 WAR as our starting third baseman. And Pimentel now joins that strong list of American League Rookie of the Year award winners that we've put together with these Oakland A's. In the last 8 years at this point, Pimentel joins Andy Toribio, the infielder, and Jake Ortega, the franchise, as American League Rookies of the Year that our Oakland A's farm system has grown and generated. Ortega, of course, the strongest of those. He is now a two-time MVP award winner, in addition to that Rookie of the Year award back in 2032. And in news that's as unsurprising as Pimentel and Selvey being 1-2 in the AL Rookie of the Year voting, Kip Wells, American League Manager of the Year. That is a award that he has dominated ever since he came up. We promoted him from our AAA team to be our Major League Manager in 2029. We won the World Series that year, and he has added 2 other World Series more recently, and he is now a 4-time American League Manager of the Year. Interestingly, this is the first time he's won the award that we didn't win the World Series. The other 3 times, Kip Wells was the AL Manager of the Year. Our Oakland A's went on to win the World Series title, so a bit hollow of an award for him after the way this postseason went. And not surprisingly, we weren't really serious competitors for the Cy Young Award in the American League. Kind of knew that Steve Genis of the Texas Rangers was going to win a 6th consecutive AL Cy Young Award this year, after he tied for the league lead in games started and led the American League in wins, innings pitched, strikeouts, ERA, strikeouts per 9 innings, quality start percentage, FIP minus, and WAR with a 9.7 WAR. Not surprisingly, Genis was a unanimous American League Cy Young Award winner. Over in the National League, your Cy Young Award winner is the brilliant two-way player Mike Ramsey. He is also a unanimous Cy Young Award winner this year, the 4th Cy Young Award of his career. Led the league with 21 wins, innings pitched, over 300 strikeouts, a sub-2 ERA, a .80 WHIP, a ridiculous 45 FIP minus, and almost as ridiculous 11.5 WAR as a pitcher for Mr. Ramsey. Ramsey, of course, is a brilliant two-way player, and he was also a unanimous National League Most Valuable Player this year. Our old buddy Brady Harris, solid season, got some MVP votes after hitting .289 with 40 homers and 115 ribbies for the Reds. You may remember we had to move on from him. He was going to be making a ton of money, and we picked up Chase Dora and got the Reds to retain a significant chunk of the good starting pitcher's contract in the trade when we dealt Harris a few years ago, but he has certainly remained a very effective offensive player for the Reds. But Ramsey is the guy that we are really focused on. He is, as we said, a 4-time Cy Young Award winner now, and he is now a 5-time National League MVP, and he's actually won 5 consecutive MVP awards at this point. He did miss out on the Cy Young Award a year ago, so 4 out of the last 5 Cy Young Awards for Ramsey, who at 28 years old is making a strong case to be the greatest player in baseball history, and amazingly, that includes Babe Ruth when we're looking at what Ramsey's accomplished so far. 104 and 49 as a pitcher with a 2.76 ERA and a 50 WAR as a pitcher already at the age of 28. Looking at what he did this year as a batter, a bit of an off year for him. Only 28 homers and 88 ribbies, 35 doubles, and a .315 batting average to go with that brilliant pitching performance he put together. But as he sits here heading into what will be his age 29 season, already has over 200 home runs. He's led the league in homers and ribbies twice, and he's put up a 37.5 WAR as a batter already. He's durable, still in his 20s, and if he remains healthy, the combination of outstanding pitching and outstanding hitting that he could potentially end his career with is going to be borderline legendary. And I don't throw around someone being a better player than Babe Ruth lightly, but if Ramsey does what he's been doing for another 8+ years, it's going to be hard to argue that Mike Ramsey, Sadique, is not the best player in baseball history. And the one award of the big awards that we had a guy in the mix for was certainly the American League MVP. Didn't necessarily think that Landin would win. He ended up third in first place votes behind the winner Sergio Rivera as well as Steve Genis. But second overall in the voting, as we noted, Landin, outstanding year for us with both the bat and the glove. Healthy this year despite his fragility with 154 games played, and going to be counting on the switch hitter to have a significant role in our lineup again next year. But your American League most valuable player was Sergio Rivera of the Tampa Bay Rays. Center fielder, hit .297, 30 homers and 99 ribbies. Excellent defensive outfielder with outstanding range and a very good arm. Put up an American League best 8.3 WAR. He won a Silver Slugger this year. He was an All-Star. He won a Gold Glove, and he is also named the AL MVP. Our Rookie of the Year, Juan Pimentel, despite spending the first couple months of the season in the minors, got some MVP votes. Arturo Uresti, the outfielder who had 37 homers and 100 and ribbies for us while playing right field, got some MVP support as well. And as we get ready for free agency filings tomorrow, not surprising that Juan Ramos has declined our qualifying offer, so he's going to become a free agent. We hope he gets a big, long contract to make that pick as value as possible at this point. Thank Ramos for what he's done for us over the years. 4 really strong offensive seasons with us, but he's going to be 30 before next season starts. Fragile physically. He is truly a DH given his fragility and his poor defense. And we are conceivably going to be moving the franchise, Mr. Ortega, into that DH role or possibly a first base role next year to hopefully keep him, who is wrecked physically, as healthy as possible and in the lineup. So given the money that Ramos was looking for and his own issues with his health and his defense, felt like it made sense to let him move on, get paid by somebody else, and hopefully we'll get a supplemental first-round pick for the departure of Ramos when all is said and done. And we've made it to the start of free agency. Before we take a look at some of the top major league free agents on the market, we'll see if there are any international players coming over that merit some attention. Certainly the starting pitcher, Xu Hao, out of Taiwan, looks like a potentially excellent starting pitcher. The 33, soon to be 34-year-old, looking for over $20 million a year. Certainly think he'll be able to help some team. Also looks good in the clubhouse, but given that we like our rotation and given the money that he's looking for, Cuddy is unlikely to be someone that we are strongly going after. Reliever out of South Africa, Osano Batanguliz, right-handed reliever. Looks like he could be a very interesting player as well, looking for close to $11 million. Not a ton of other interesting players, but the last one I'm going to look at is an outstanding prospect, and that's the shortstop, Chisen Iwata, going to be 23 years old next week. Looks like he is a player with good speed, looks like a pretty good defensive infielder, could potentially be an outstanding second baseman. Some really positive traits in the clubhouse with high leadership, work ethic, and intelligence. Potentially outstanding contact hitter with really good gap power, acceptable eye, and not bad home run power. Given his age, he could be a pretty interesting player. I don't know that $17.5 million a year, and I'm guessing he's looking for many seasons. Yeah, 5-year contract with a player opt out after 3 years for close to $90 million. Not sure that is something that we can swing here in Oakland. And as we've talked about, I really like our infield, but a 23-year-old with the profile that Melody Iwata has, being on the open market, is certainly a very interesting thing to consider, with the fact that we did move on from several of those arbitration eligible players. We've got money available for the next couple of years. At the very least, we are certainly going to scout the likes of Su Hao, Matangalizi, and then, of course, Iwata. I don't know that we're going to be able to sign any of these guys. If we were to do one, I think the shortstop Iwata is certainly the way to go. As we've talked about, I really like our infield with Landin at second, Toribio at short, Pimentel at third, Alcindor signed. He could be in the mix for any of those positions, or first base. And we've also got some young infielders, prospects like Godina, Orellana, Castillo around. Lishman is still part of the organization with options. So feel like we're pretty sound in the infield, but I have talked in the past about potentially moving Toribio into more of a utility infielder role in the final seasons of his contract, and being able to bring in a ready-made, potentially outstanding middle infielder and a guy like Iwata is a rare opportunity in the free agent market, and something that I'm going to at least think about. If you've got thoughts on the topic, obviously would be great to hear those as well. Turning to the top major league free agents, obviously Iwata is on the list, Ramos from our team, and then Joe Edwards, Razor Edwards, who had a long run with the Kansas City Royals, now 32 years old, wrecked physically, had some really outstanding seasons at the beginning of his career, hit over 30 homers for the first 4 full seasons he had in the majors in his early to mid-20s. Unfortunately, the injuries have started to have a bit of an impact on him since then. Over the last 8 seasons, he's topped 30 home runs and 100 ribbies just once. So with a 49.2 WAR at the age of 32, still has had an outstanding major league career as a third baseman. Borderline Hall of Fame career. Probably, given that he's now heading into his mid-30s and he's wrecked physically, he's going to have years more like these last few that he's had, but still has an outside chance of getting to 400 home runs, a very remote chance of getting to 1,500 ribbies, with a 130 career WRC plus, on the fact that he does have 4 Gold Glove awards to go with a couple of Silver Sluggers, and then being a perennial All-Star. Still not inconceivable that Mr. Edwards could end up as a Hall of Famer, as a third baseman, but I have a feeling some of, while his counting stats may be improving over the next few years, I have a hunch that his 267 career batting average, 130 career WRC plus, and 866 career OPS will all be moving in the wrong direction the longer he continues playing. Some interesting catchers and corner infielders as well on the market. Rodney Mesidor, who we moved on from Bryce Rainier, a guy that we looked at in the draft many, many years ago among the free agents as well. Unlikely, I think, that outside of potentially making a bold move on a shortstop like Iwata, that we will be particularly active in the free agent market. And that also includes the pitchers. Howe and Matangalizi are the top two pitchers on the market. We had already talked about how Hunsaker looked like he was going to be one of the top arms on the market, and we just locked him up. Certainly would love to be adding one of these veteran international free agent pitchers, but given their age, given the strength of our pitching staff, including some really good young pitchers, and given that if we were to perhaps pursue something a bit more ambitious in free agency this year, I think Iwata is probably the logical path to go. I don't think we're going to be particularly active with the pitchers who are available in the free agent market at this point. Clearly, if someone lingers on the market and gets cheap, or if someone really lingers and is willing to sign a minor league contract several months from now, we could reconsider that. But right now, I think the big decision as we begin free agency is, do we just attempt to make a outstanding infield, potentially even more outstanding, by pursuing the young infielder from Japan, Chisen Iwata. And if you've got thoughts on that front or anything else that we've talked about this episode, or just anything else that you've thought about, would love to hear them in the comments section. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.